Boys, girls, any question?
No.
Okay. Right, so let me start then sharing. This is the window here. Yeah, so I think I stopped in characterization as the as I think the important last time I think we finished character and action, and I told you it's something like similar to this part here, which is, as I said, the characterization, and I think you can see it here. You can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So really, from the title itself, characterization really is how to make characters. How do you create a character as a novelist or a short story writer, or even as a playwright or dramatist? How do you make your characters? How do you create them? How do you describe them? What kind of people do you want them? Do you want them to be men, women, old men, young boys, young girls, children, wild creatures, animals, or whatever? So you have to decide on which topic you want your characters. Of course, everything is connected here, is related to each other, really, because when you are writing a story, you are writing a novel or a short story or a play. Of course, your subject is man, is a human being. So that's why you have to think of the way you make your people look like, the way we behave, the way they behave, the way they talk, the way they dress, what kind of people, kind people, angry, etc., etc., etc. So all these things really, how do you make your people look like in the play or in the short story or the novel? So this is what we mean by, briefly, characterization. How to characterize characters, how to describe characters, how to draw, to portray your characters. Really, this is the main idea here. And you can see here, for example, from the first part of my chapter here, as you can see, characterization seems very close or even the same as character, but it's not. When I say character, originally when I was talking about character and action, meaning, the person. Characterization is the art of individualizing a character in fiction. This is very briefly how to make, notice here I say individualizing, how to make somebody as an individual, someone who's, for example, specifically the way he or she is, so this is the idea about individualizing, making someone as a person in every sense, the way he speaks, the way he looks like, the way the way they, etc. This means giving each and every character certain attributes or qualities that will make them easily distinguishable from one another. That's, you make people look, for example, they are different. If you have, depends how many characters do you have. But of course, in any fiction or any short story, you will have many, sometimes, quite a few characters. So they will not be exactly the same, of course, because we people are not the same. We are not always the same. We don't behave, we don't talk, we don't smile, we don't whatever the same. We are a bit different. So this is the idea here about how you make each character. So here, the first I say, this process of individualization simply begins by assigning each character a name, which will automatically differentiate it from the rest. Immediately you say, well, I want one character called John. and another character called Sarah, for example, another character called Smith, or another character called Ahmed, and so on. So first you give the name, and then you start to think of other things. So here, I'm saying, this may simply seem simple, sorry, but characterization is really a much more delicate, demanding, and complex operation. It's not just giving someone a name. You have to give a lot of other things to make the people or the character really acceptable, and so on. So I'm saying here, the act of developing and making characters different individuals is very much connected and determined by the numerous requirements of plot, character analysis, and the development of the action. Yeah, meaning that you make your character suitable to your story. You have a theme, for example, about war, you have a theme about love, you have a theme about nature, and so on. So you have to, to maybe pick and choose a character to suit your situation and your plot and your, for example, main action, and so on. So, you can't draw your character just like that out of the blue. You have to think of the other elements of fiction. You have to think of other things, whether you want this to be a character, a main character, or a secondary character. You have to make, for example, this is the hero or heroine or another character, or do you want this to be, it depends on what exactly you are trying to tell us. So this is the idea. So how you make everything look like, this person, for example. So here I go back again to say, giving a character a name is the first important factor of individualization. So first you say, this is John. You say, John, I want John to be a man of 40 years old, man, for example. Or I want John to be 20. I want John to be living in London, for example. My place, because it's London. Or I want my story to be in Paris or in Damascus. So you have to think of other elements. I'm saying the second step of characterization involves whatever else the writer may choose to tell us or show us about that character, which would later formulate his particular portrait in the reader's imagination. As I'm saying, do you want John to be an old man, or do you want John to be 20 or 25? Do you want John to be a teacher, or a married man, or to be a single man? Do you want John to be a soldier, or to be an army officer, or to be a postman, or to be what? So you have to give more and more and more details to say what John is really looking like. And this is what I mean, other elements, other ideas. You see, so this is the question here, how you formulate the character. Now, this level of individualization is the level of moral, mental, inner, and psychological level. I'm saying you have to not just give us the name or the age or the way he looked like, the way he dressed. You have also maybe to give us more about that, how he thinks. What kind of man is he, His mentality, his near, if you like, he's near to us, he's good, he's friendly, he's angry, his own inner thoughts, his own psychological thinking, and etc. So all these elements also are part of what we call individualization or really characterization. For example, here I say, which is different from that of family name and description of the external appearances. Now, it's the level which deals with the social background, with past or present occupation, or with the description of his relation or its relation to the other characters. So you see here, so I'm saying here you give more and more and more details. As we shall see later when we study these short stories, you will know, you meet the character for the first time, and step by step, you start to learn about that character. Maybe because in your own way as a writer, you know in your mind that that character is a good character, for example. And then you show us how good. how good this character is, and so on. So this is the idea that writers have the impression, they know what to say, they know what kind of picture this man maybe is having, or is, if you like, going to be in the reader's imagination in the same way. So that's the idea, what we say here about all these factors. I say all these factors or pieces of information will help individualize a character a little further, and will move him into a higher level of characterization, both in the context of the story and in the reader's mind. Yeah, I'm saying, when you give the name, as I said, you give the name, the place, the relations, the wife and husband, children, etc., etc. The position, the job, what kind of man, and so on. So you give all these elements, then you start to put the character in context, to say, well, yeah, this character is good and this character is whatever. So this is the idea when we see what I mean, the context, the exact position of that character in the place or in the society where, you have your story. So this is what I mean, as we say, the first parts or the first questions that you give about characterization, how to characterize, how to describe, how to create, how to make your character. So the more information we get about a character, the higher we go up into the level of characterization. Yes, because, when you know a lot of information, you know a lot of things about, a lot of details about a character. So that means, you know him more. So I'm saying here, this means that main characters are given larger amount of information than secondary ones. Yes, because when you're talking about, secondary, because secondary, you don't talk to them a lot, you don't need them a lot. So that's why you don't need to know a lot about them. So that's why the more you have information about a character, it means that character is a main character, because you are given a lot of information about him or her. So that's why here you immediately know that this person is important, because you are being given a lot of details about him or her. This is the idea. So in the same way, there is no need to have complete knowledge of a secondary one or a secondary character's personality. As I'm saying, when we say secondary, it means secondary. It means you don't know, or you didn't need to know. You don't need to know all the details about a certain character whom you are not going to see, whom you are not going to talk to a lot, and so on. So you don't really need to know his personality or her personality, a lot. So this is the idea I'm saying. So we can now see how it is, for example, far more difficult to draw or to characterize the main characters than to draw the secondary ones. So that's the idea. That means in a secondary character, you don't give a lot of details. Therefore, it's easy to make them. Whereas a main character, because you want to give a lot of information about him or her, so therefore you have to be careful, because you have to give us a lot of information. So that's why maybe it's more responsibility, and you have to be careful what to say about them. Here I'm talking about the author, how the author makes his characters, okay? So really, this is the idea I'm saying here. So here I say, since the main characters or the heroes or protagonists of the story perform most of the action, then they are given greater attention than the secondary ones, and therefore they are far more difficult to characterize. I think I said that because I'm saying, because main characters are main characters, you have to give a lot of ideas about them. Therefore, I'm saying it could be more difficult to convince the reader about a certain character. You have to give a lot of things about him or her, so to make him or her look like real life. This is what I'm saying really here. So really, this is what we mean by characterization. Okay. So another key element of characterization here involves the distinction made between changing or developing characters or static characters. Here again, you say, am I going to make this character who looks like this all the time, or am I going to make my character changeable? Meaning, one day he's angry, one day he's happy, another day he's this, and another day he's that, and so on. So this is what I mean by, do you want your characters to be completely fixed, or you want them to be developing and changing and alternating all the time? And this is what I mean here by changing or developing. Or static means do they change or they don't. So this is the idea. Developing characters are those that appear to be one thing at the beginning of the story and gradually turn into something else. This is the idea. You change. Somebody who's, for example, who's tough, who's, for example, strong and so on, but suddenly, or maybe after maybe a while in the story, or after a year, it depends how many times you meet this character, then later on you find that character has changed. This is the idea. We say changing characters. They change, they develop, they don't stick to the same thing. So this is the idea. Gradually they turn to something else, means they dynamically change. Notice, dynamically change, dramatically change. You can see that they change. And they develop, and sometimes they shock and surprise us, you see? So this is the idea. If you have a character who is really very dramatic, who's changing a lot, who's developing a lot, and shocking you, and so on, by the way he or she is behaving. This is what we mean by developing character. Meaning, you can't see this character on one angle. You see him always in different angles and in different perspectives. This is the idea here. Static, of course, is the opposite, really. Exactly the opposite. Static means boom, stopped, means absolutely no change. Static characters, however, remain virtually the same from beginning to end, sincere to their own fixed labels. They don't change. They are the same. They are the same from the very beginning till the very end. They don't change. They don't shock you. They don't, develop. Again, they enter and leave the story displaying a single attitude. They remain the same. Angry man, for example, somebody who behaves in an angry way will always be the same. This is the idea about one character, or one label, one attitude. A single attitude representing one view concerned with achieving one personal objective. They do not change. They are undeveloping characters, and they are fixed. Static characters are not necessarily less important or less, for example, valuable. Not necessarily less important. You see, this is the idea. Not necessarily less important or minor characters in the story. They can be heroes of the best stories and novels, for example, in the world, really. So static doesn't mean not important. I'm not saying that. I'm saying they don't change. You could be a hero who cannot change. And I told you, I think I will tell you later on, we have so many examples in fiction. We have characters who are always the same. They don't change, they don't shock, but still they are the heroes, for example, and the heroines of the story. Doesn't matter. So being changeable or being static has nothing to do with being minor or main character. Has nothing to do with being hero or heroine or secondary character. This is what I'm saying. And I gave you, really here, I gave you examples in the stories which we are going to study later. In the selection of the stories below, we have many good examples of static characters who are also heroes and heroines. For example, I say Emily in Faulkner's A Rose for Emily like Rhoda Brooke in Hardy's The Withered Arm, or like Dmitri in Chekhov's The Lottery Ticket, the husband in Maupassant's The Necklace. These people are static, they are fixed, but they are heroes and heroines. They don't change. Like, as we shall see, Emily in Rose for Emily. Rhoda Brooke in Hardy's The Withered Arm. Maybe we're not going to study this one, but for example, again, the husband in The Necklace, we shall see that. These people are the same, they don't change. That's what we mean here, being static. Now, if you like, some of them can be seen as, if you like, the same stories. You have, developing characters or changing characters. Now, for example, these stories contain a lot of round and developing characters, such as, maybe again to mention only a few, for example, the wife in Maupassant's The Necklace, as we shall see. The wife who is developing and changing, as we shall see. And the American wife in Hemingway's Cat in the Rain, again, I will give you that. You shall see this, a character who's also, changing and developing. Again, if you like, we have more and more examples. Later on, we shall see how, you have this idea to differentiate between fixed or developing, changing or static character. I think this is, again, an important thing. When you want to make a character, you should know how you're going to do this. Again, in the same way, we have another word for this. We say round or flat, the same thing, really. Round or flat. Round, developing, flat, fixed. Round, developing or changing, flat, fixed, not changing. So here, the same difference, I say, is equally true between what's called round characters or flat characters. These share also the most qualities of the developing and static characters, but are not interchangeable with them. A round character is one which we see from various angles. For example, we look at it through a circular perspective, and we see it in different lights and conditions, displaying different attitudes and determinations, and so on. The idea, again, as I said, exactly nearly the same. Again, I say a flat character, on the other hand, is one that displays a single attitude. Just that's what I say. Flat means one side, not double-sided or many-sided. That's why you say round means you can see the character from so many sides. And this is again here. Again, we say, for example, Madame or Mr. Loisel in the story The Necklace. For example, he's the husband in Hemingway's story Cat in the Rain, who is, as you can see, I say he is a flat character who's always, really one attitude. He does not change. Again, you can see, for example, the husband in Hemingway's Cat in the Rain. Again, he is fixed character. He does not change. Again, we may have more and more examples of that later on. We shall see, and I think we can immediately spot a character. We say, well, this character does not ever change. So that's why we say, he is a flat character. Let me see again. I'm just checking something. Just a second. I want to see. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So to go on and to give more ideas, if you like, or similar ideas about that, we conclude, as you can see here, by we have two ways of presenting characters. Here we may say this is something really important. How do you present your characters? How do you really show them to your readers? So we have, I'm saying here we have two ways: expository ways, or expository way, or dramatic way. How do you show this? You know, expository means how you prepare, you know, step by step, you know, how you introduce slowly, really slowly and straightforward manner. You know, this is what we call expository, meaning in a simple, straightforward manner. Simple, straightforward manner. Notice, it involves the straightforward description of the character's appearance, nature, and values, the way, you know, this character is developing. So we say here we are, for example, here we are told by the writer or narrator what a character is like, and we have to accept that information. You know, we are given slowly and easily and in a nice way all the information bit by bit about that character. So that's why we call this straightforward manner or expository. It means how you're exposing your character, how you're showing your character. In dramatic, because the word dramatic, you know, it's something else. For example, notice here I say it is done through a situation or the situation in which a character is placed, through, for example, juxtaposition and contrast with other characters, through conversation and dialogue. You know, you don't give information about him, but you leave other characters to tell you about him. You put a character in a certain situation, and then you can see the way he or she behaves, and then you will know what kind of character is this. You know, so it's really this is what we mean by drama, meaning by his behavior you will know him, by his action you will know him, by his friends you will know him, by his, you know, whatever he's doing in the story you will know him, not by what the narrator tells you about him. You know, I think again we shall see this. Let me give you an example. I think I shall give you an example here briefly. Yeah. Look, the first short story, I think you read this in the Lang. Maybe some of you studied this in last year, or maybe I don't know. Didn't you?
Yes, we read it before.
Yeah. Look at this first paragraph. She was one of those pretty and charming girls who are sometimes, as if by a mistake of destiny, born in a family of clerks. She had no dowry, no expectations, no means of being known, understood, loved, wedded by any rich and distinguished man, and she let herself be married to a little clerk in the Ministry of Public Instruction. You see, so when you say here, she dressed plainly because she could not dress well, but she was unhappy as though she had really been or fallen from her proper station, since with women there is neither caste nor rank and beauty. She suffered ceaselessly, blah, blah, blah. So notice here the most, you know, the information we are given about she, you know, about this woman. She. You see, so how many times and how much we are given information by the narrator. We have not yet seen the character here. So this is what we mean by direct exposition, by expository introduction. You are given the information bit by bit, about this woman, Matilde, when we say here, she, and he goes on, she, and even the third paragraph, she, and yet we don't know what's her name yet. Okay? Even in the whole paragraph, notice the third paragraph, she, again, you can see all the sentences beginning, she thought, she did, and again, when she sat down, even in the fourth paragraph, and the fifth paragraph, she had no dresses, she had a friend. For God's sake, who's this she? Till finally, of course, we knew that this is, she is Madame Matilde, right? So we have been given a lot of information about this character without really meeting her, without seeing her, without talking to her, or without talking to anybody. All this introduction, all this first page, it's really what we call expository, characterization. Okay, really, this is the idea here when I say, here when I say expository representation, straightforward description of a character, how it appears, the nature, the values, blah, blah, blah. And we are told everything by the writer or the narrator. What kind of character is this? And so on. You see, this is what I mean. Whereas in dramatic presentation, you see a character immediately in the action. You get to know him immediately in the action, in the middle of the action. This is the idea. Okay? In this way, for example, in this method, we are shown what the character is like by the ways in which she or he behaves without much interference by the writer. So in a way, I'm saying here, indeed, in both situations, we observe the character not only in action, but also in the act of moral deliberation, meaning the way, of course, thinking to do with their own life and moralities and so on. Moral deliberation is the act of the examination of the overall situation of the character and what its world means, what they really are, their own personality, I'm saying here morality, what do you really think of them? Now, this really implies the highest point of characterization. That is, when you know a character in experience, in reality, in background, region, past, present, future, blah, 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 all this, it's called moral deliberation, meaning knowing that character completely from every single aspect. Okay, so that's it really I want to say today about characterization, and I think it's an important, really very important element of fiction, and really element of any really piece of literature, short story, novel, or a play, really, or even in a poem, Sometimes you have to characterize a character in a poem, because poems also talk about people. So the setting, any question?
No.
Boys? Questions? Okay, so it means, yeah. So let me check. Are you all here, or maybe you're asleep? Let me read the names who are here. Okay. So Abdullah Shibli, just say yes.
Yes.
If you can't say yes, say yes on the chat. Ahmed Belushi.
Yes.
Ahmed, I think this Ahmed told me he's not here. Ahmed Al-Hashmi? Yeah, he asked me, I think. Yeah?
Here, Doctor.
Oh, maybe. Do I have another Ahmed here? I don't know. I'll check. Are you Ahmed Al-Hashmi?
Al-Hashami.
Al-Hashami. Let me see who's that guy who sent me. Ahmed Al-Belushi. Ahmed Salim Al-Belushi? Here? Ahmed?
Yes, mister.
You said you're not going to attend the lecture. How come you're here?
Yeah, I changed plans. I will
Yeah,
be there.
okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, no problem. Okay, good. Now, Buthaina?
Yes, doctor.
Are you Buthaina or her sister?
No, I am Buthaina.
Okay. Haneen?
Yes, Mister.
Haneen? Yeah.
Yes.
Idris?
Yes, Mister, I'm here.
Marwa?
Yes, here, Mister.
Noor Abu Saidi?
Yes, Mister.
Razan?
Yes, Mister, I'm here.
Good. Saud?
Yes, Doctor, I'm here.
Suha?
Yes, doctor, I'm here.
And Sumaya?
Present, doctor.
Very good. Good girls, good boys. Yeah, I think I have 2 people absent. I don't know. I will check them later. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, okay. So to move on in our discussion today, the setting really is very simple. Setting really is very easy, which is really the place and time of a story. Just that, place and time of the story. Really, the context, where and when the story happened. So I'm saying here, very simple, a story setting is the time and place of a story. As in drama, it's where and when the events are supposed to be taking place. In drama, we can quickly tell by the style of furniture, the costumes worn by actors, the language they use, what country and which place or which period the play represents. In other words, for example, in drama, the scene of action is already set even before us or even before the action begins. Here in a play, when you go to stage, when you go to watch a play, you sit on the stage and you watch the stage and you can see everything, you know, and this description or this all this place itself, you can see it in a play directly. But in a novel or in a short story, you don't see it directly. Somebody has to tell you that there is a room, we have 2 rooms, 3 rooms, we have 1 bedroom, we have 2 lounge, we have 1 kitchen. What is in the kitchen? What is in the bedroom? How many tables? How many chairs? How many beds? How many, etc. How the color of the door, the color of the walls, and so on. All this in a novel has to be told to you directly by narration. Somebody has to tell you that we have a big house, and this house looks like, and this house has 3 rooms, and this house blah, 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 and there is a garden, and there's, you know, etc. Whereas in a play, you see it in one shot. You see it immediately, like, and you look around and you can see everything without looking. If you see a character, the way that character is dressed, you can see. Whereas in a novel, you have to say that this man is wearing a t-shirt, for example, or this man or this woman wearing, for example, a nice suit, and so on. So in a play, you see directly everything. You don't need anybody to tell you. But in a novel or a short story, you have to be told. Everything is told to us directly by the narrator. In fiction, I said direct description and or dialogue replace the stage to supply information about the time and place of the action. Setting is the context, as I said, the context, the background, the locale, the surroundings, you see? So here I say the locale, you know, the whole place, the entire thing, the surroundings where the characters exist and their actions develop, you know? For example, if you are in a village, you have to describe how this village, you know, how many people, how many houses, etc., etc. So you have to put the whole thing in context. You know, this is what we mean by the context, the society, the whole thing. And that's what you say, setting, how you set things up. You are setting things up, how you are really arranging things. So really in fiction, to know the setting is good. It's important to know that this short story is in Muscat or in Beirut or in London. You know, you have to, because by saying this novel or short story is in London is different. Of course, immediately you get the idea, oh, this is London, or this is Muscat, or this is Beirut, or this is Damascus, or this is India, you know? So really the place is immediately, by knowing the place, you will get some idea in your mind. And again, when you know the time, you say, well, Muscat today is not like Muscat 50 years back, for example. You can immediately think, they say, oh, in 50 years, things were not like this. You know, you can tell. And, you know, for example, Muscat 100 years back definitely is not like today. So when you say you give a story about Muscat about 50 years back or 100 years back, then definitely you start to visualize things. So that's what I'm saying here. So that's why really we say in fiction, to know the setting is very important. You know, immediately you will know a lot of stuff. Setting is important in fiction, for characters are greatly and directly determined by their surroundings and society. Yeah, of course, we are made by our society. We are affected by society. We behave according to what society would like us to behave. We can't behave the way we like. You know, we can't, because we are part of society. So this is the idea here. You know, for example, I'm saying you put a character in Beirut, not the same as character in London, or a character in for example, Baghdad is not like a character in Riyadh or in London, you know. So the idea here, the society, if you like, determines a lot of what you are, makes a lot of what you really are, how you speak, how you behave, how you talk, how you eat, etc. Man, I'm saying, is largely formulated by what he sees and hears and learns in his society. Yeah, we are made by our society. He or his thoughts are made up of the dictates of outside reality. And the language he speaks, of the culture he lives, and so on, the social context he finds himself in, and so on. So, for example, for example, people say this, you know, why do you speak Arabic, for example? Because you were born here. You know, if you were born in London, you would have been speaking English, for example. If you were born in Denmark, you would be speaking Danish, of course, because the idea here is you are made by your society. If you were born in London, maybe you would be a Christian person, for example. You would be a Buddhist, you would be whatever religious figure. It depends where you are born. So where you are born and you were made in your language, your character, your religion, your reality, your background, the way you are, etc., etc. You know, you are made by your own society and where you are born. And this is the idea. So setting here, we are saying, is quite important to see how a character is behaving. So that's what I'm saying here, the conditions, the direct and the language and the religion, the social, etc., etc. Man is the direct product of his conditions and circumstances and of his whole background. That's why studying the setting is quite an essential endeavor in fiction. That's why, yes, we always want to know the context. We want to know the context. You know, for example, the way we read a story now, we as, for example, Arab students, Arab learners, as foreign learners to the language, we are different, definitely not the same like English students in London, or like Danish students in Denmark, or Swedish students in Sweden. We are not. The way we think is different. Our background, our culture, our language, our religion, our people, the way we look at our wives, our mothers, our women, our etc., etc. You know, a lot of things are different. So our understanding of things is different. So we have to know the context. We understand a character through a context. We say, yeah, that character lived in London. Therefore, if he does this, so because this is what people do in London. If somebody in Muscat, we say, yeah, because this is how people in Muscat behave. And this is how people do things. So knowing the context is absolutely important, and we have to know the context. In studying fiction, in studying literature, we have always to locate the character in context. And maybe we have to borrow this into our own context and to even shed some of our context on the text itself, on the novel itself or the play itself. Because you are studying it, you are reading it, maybe you don't like what you see, you give your own evaluation. And this is what we say here, how you contextualize your text. Contextualize your text, the way you read it, the way you understand it. That's why we study literature today in for example, in the world today. We are foreigners, for example, we are different culture. This is British culture, or this is French culture, this is European culture, this is maybe another totally different culture. Yeah. We're not supposed to take that culture. We're not supposed to follow that culture. We are not supposed to obey that culture. No, we understand it and we take what we like. And we, you know, if you like, we do things the way we feel is right and is proper. And that's why really we say here, the beauty of literature. Really the beauty of literature, of learning things that you think suitable to you, nice to you, you know, suitable to your culture and to your own background. And that's what we say here. We have to know the circumstances and the background. So we say here, setting, we say, yeah, then this is really very important. I'm saying setting is the prime mover of action because it influences characters, their attitudes and their behavior, and it governs the greater part of their relations. You know, for example, you say, hey, people don't do that here. Don't do this because people don't do that here. Hey, don't say this sentence here. People don't say this word here. You say, hey, don't, etc. So the attitudes, the characters, the whatever you behave is, you know, conditioned, is controlled by your society. So that's why here a character's action, a character's behavior is conditioned really by his own society. The way you speak today, the way you sit today, you know, the way you sit today, for example, and maybe listening to my lecture today, for example, is different from people giving or taking a lecture like today, or online lecture, for example, you know, would be different. But here in Oman, for example, this is what we do, and we don't do otherwise, because this is how our society is, you know. So we are made, we are conditioned, we are structured, we are restructured, we are, if you like, written and rewritten. We are, etc., by our own people. You don't do this because your parents will not allow you. You don't speak like that because your father will not let you, or your parents, or your school teacher, or your grandparents, or your villagers. You don't behave like that because your people don't want you to behave like this, and so on. You know, this is the idea, really. It's setting really controls our character, our behavior, influences our attitude, our mentality, and so on. So through setting, the probability of character and the plausibility of action are measured. Again, you say, well, this is probable because in that society people do this. You say, yeah, that's possible, and that's plausible, and that's convincing, and that's etc. Again, you say, you know, the setting is, again, should be, as you say, compatible with the characters and their social contexts. Again, you say, this is, you don't put a character or, you know, in a very, for example, a very strange situation, and you say, yeah, you know. Again, the story such as A Rose for Emily, for example, will be acceptable as an interesting case of the Gothic setting with its horror story, and the terrifying and supernatural moods will explain its horrifying symbolism. You know, like a story, for example, we say here, you know, classical fiction, for example, in Greek drama or in Greek literature, or in a classical pre-Islamic story, or in pre-Islamic poetry, we say, well, in those days people behaved like that. And we say, okay, for them it was okay, but for us now it's not okay. You know, this is the idea. In for example, mythological time, there was the belief in the multiplicity of gods. You know, people believed in that. They said there are gods, you know, and they believed in this, you know. But later on, of course, this idea of the multiplicity of gods was rejected by all these monotheistic religions, especially our religion, Islam, for example. You know, we don't accept this idea about the whole thing. So socially speaking, contextually speaking, you know, morally speaking, there are a lot of things which are made, which are controlled, which are changed through society, through context, through the background, and so on. So sometimes you accept things because society accepts it. You know, you don't like something because society don't like it. If you sometimes behave otherwise, people will say, ah, look at him, he's funny, or she's funny, you know. Setting, again, I say finally here, helps create the atmosphere and the general tone and mode of the story. As we shall see later, atmosphere is directly related to the prevalence mood that permeates the story, which suggests how it's written by the author and how to be read for the reader or by the reader. For example, they say a background of poverty and general hardship introduces a mood of suffering and misery, whereas a background of prosperity and social affluence inevitably leads to an atmosphere of joy and happiness for the reader and readers alike, for example. You know, for the writer and readers alike. So the background of poverty and hardship with its mood of suffering and misery is very nicely portrayed, for example, as we shall see in stories like The Necklace or The Lottery Ticket, for example. So the setting tells us a lot about the meaning, about the kind of story, the mood of the story. You know, it depends. It depends. I'm saying here that the setting really helps a lot in this idea how people or the information that you get immediately through the setting. Yeah, I think that's it. As I said, you can see here briefly, I did that. I did not really elaborate more, really no need for more elaboration. And today here, if I give you a little bit of point of view, is quite really interesting, as I mentioned. Just a minute. We still have 15 minutes. Let me see if I want to again double check something. Yeah. In here, really, I will give you 5-10 minutes in this, and that's it. Now, the word point of view, really, it's an important part here, an important, really important element of fiction. We call it point of view. Really means how novels are narrated. From what perspective, from what view we see the action. Who is telling us the action? Who's telling us the action? Who's narrating to us the action? Who's telling us when he says she? Who's speaking here? She looks like. Yeah. Here, notice, she was one. I go back to the necklace here, to the necklace, okay? She was one of those pretty and charming girls. She dressed plainly because she suffered ceaselessly, blah, blah, blah. Huh? Suha? Suha?
Yes, doctor.
Who's speaking here? Who's telling us
Suha.
she was? Huh?
The writer.
The writer. Who? You mean this one here? The name Guy de Maupassant? This Frenchman? Maupassant?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Do you agree, girls? The writer speaking? Hello?
Maybe it's the third person.
What third person? Who?
It is like point of view. We have the first person and the second person and the third person. The third person is the one who say she and he.
Very good, Ya Buthaina. How do you know that? Very good.
I remember it from lengths of reading.
Oh, really? Lovely. Buthaina. What's your surname here?
Buthaina Saidi.
Yeah, Saidi. Yeah, very well, yeah, Buthaina. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fiction, always in fiction, we have what we call narrator. Narrator. In Arabic, we say arrawi. Arrawi. Now, we always confuse between narrator and author. Suha said the writer. Yes, I agree with you, but not completely. Always, yeah, Suha, always writers use other people to tell the stories for them. We call it narrator. Narrator could be a man or a woman. telling the story in his or her voice, not Maupassant, not Maupassant directly. Could be a first person narrator who's saying I. You know, because later on we shall see we have characters who say I did, I worked, I spoke, I said, etc. So in fiction always, we have what we call the speaker, the narrator who tells the story on behalf of the writer, on behalf. So the writer will be hiding behind. The writer will be hiding behind the narrator. So the narrator will be in our face, and the real writer will be in the background, will be behind him. So that's why here we say, how do we see the action? We see it through the perspective of the narrator, what the narrator decides to tell us. Okay, so here in fiction we call it point of view, means how do you view the action? Do you view it through my eyes, through his eyes, through somebody's eyes, or you know, how? And in fiction always, and in sometimes in poems, in drama, we don't have narrators because we see the action immediately by the characters. We don't have someone telling us she speaks, she dresses, she walks, blah, 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 blah. Now, you say, come on, doctor. Well, it's the same like the author. Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I agree with you. Yeah, it's like the author. And you say it's the author, yeah, okay. But in criticism, in studying literature, we don't call it the author. We don't use the word author. We say the narrator. Could be because narrators could be, for example, you know, you could have a male narrator, or you could have a novel written by a man, but you have the narrator a woman, for example. It depends. It depends what kind of character, what kind of narrator you really want. You know, this is the idea we shall see in a minute. Now, narrators, that's why then we say here, point of view, the idea of point of view really means here how we readers see the action, how we see something, how we see the story. Do we see it through you know, a first person speaker or a third person speaker? Is it plural or the singular, or you know, in what sense? So here, that's why we will agree about the word when we say point of view. Notice here I say the phrase point of view in itself means how someone views or sees something. Maybe sometimes we say point of view means what do you think? You know, sometimes we say, what's your point of view about this? Means what do you really believe? What do you think about something? You say, I believe this thing is blah, 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 blah. I think this so and so and so and so. So you give your own judgment. You give your own judgment. So sometimes we say, well, yeah, okay. So this is originally, briefly, simply, that's what means, that's what point of view. But again, we say, see something, what he thinks of something, what his opinion about something. Yeah, that's the simple meaning of point of view. But in fiction, I said, this is slightly different. For point of view in fiction does not only mean the way we look at something. It's not only, notice, not only mean the way we look at the events and the action, but also how the author decides to present them to us. You know, not just how, to look at them. How the writer decides sometimes, you know, he chooses a certain way, and I will show you later examples about that. For example, point of view means the vantage point through which we see this story. The vantage means from a very clear point of view where you can see everything. A very overwhelming position. And that's what means vantage, means the top. Okay? Again, we say the direction into which we look at the events and characters. This is self-evident since every tale is told or written by an author. Yeah, of course. Because when you say here, the writer says she, meaning he knows everything and he can tell us and tell us and tell us because he's the writer. You know, he is the writer. He knows, he can tell, and he can go on and on and on and on and telling us. How do we control it? No way. No way. So, yeah, I mean, the writer, you know, tells us all the details, whether he wants to give us too much or very little. It's up to him, really. So here the idea how the writer tells us, in what voice he's telling us, what we call narrator. In fiction, the author, I say in fiction, the author is often referred to as the narrator. Here, to go back to Suha, instead of saying the author, we say the narrator. Really, in fiction, we call him the narrator, Ar-Rawi, and he's usually given a separate, distinct identity. That's why in fiction, narrators are given different personalities from the author. This chapter here deals with this main question of the narrator and in the various positions or views from which the stories are told. So here I'm going to tell you what are the narrators, what kind of narrators, and how do we see narrators, and so on. Okay, I think I will stop here and I will continue next time. Please try to finish this here, read it, point of view, and the section, the next two sections quickly, again, do them because they are simple. I'm not going to waste time. Next meeting, I'm going to finish all this. Okay, please read that and listen to the recordings from last term. It's the same thing. Okay.
Inshallah.
Right. Any question?